So usually when we talk about a massive corporation, buying an enterprise software system, there's this ingrained expectation of just, well, total absolute ownership.
Right, yeah, like it's yours to do whatever you want with.
Exactly. It's a lot like buying a house. You get the keys, you move in, and if you suddenly decide you want to knock down a load-bearing wall between the kitchen and the living room to open up the space, you just grab a sledgehammer and you do it.
Yeah, you might completely ruin the structural integrity of the house, but hey, it's your house, right?
Right. You customize it to fit exactly how you want to live.
Oh.
But here's the thing. When you step into the world of modern corporate finance and this massive migration to the cloud that's happening right now, suddenly that whole homeownership model is just completely gone.
It really is. I mean, that homeownership mindset, that was the standard operating procedure for corporate IT for, what, decades?
Oh, absolutely.
Companies bought the software, installed it on their own servers, and then hired literally armies of consultants to completely rewire the plumbing so it perfectly matched their highly idiosyncratic business processes.
But today, for you listening, whether you're a CFO planning out the next decade of your tech budget, or maybe an IT architect prepping for a massive migration, or even if you're just, insanely curious about how global commerce actually works behind the scenes, this deep dive is a crucial shortcut.
Yeah, we're looking at some heavy-hitting sources today. We've got a really highly technical architectural breakdown, plus a strategic analysis focusing on SAP RISE, their business technology platform, and the future of global tax compliance.
And our mission here is to decode why moving to the cloud is not just some, routine hosting upgrade. It is the absolute most consequential technology and compliance decision your company is going to make for the next 10 years.
And it's a decision that, honestly, a shocking number of companies are making right now without fully grasping the architectural constraints they are legally and technically agreeing to.
Right.
We're looking at a landscape that is just fundamentally rewriting the rules of ownership and customization.
So let's unpack this.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine moving into a high-tech, absolute state-of-the-art smart home. But there's a massive catch.
There always is.
Right. The landlord strictly forbids you from modifying the wiring or the plumbing inside the house itself. You absolutely cannot touch it. If you want a custom appliance, or say your local government mandates that your house needs a specific type of energy meter, you have to build it out in the backyard and run a standardized extension cord back to the house.
That is a great way to put it. And that smart home landlord is SAP. That strict rule against touching the wiring, that's what they call the Clean Core.
Clean Core, right.
Yeah. And when you look at how SAP RISE is marketed, it sounds very holistic, like a bundle. You get hosting, you get the S/4HANA ERP, you get credits for their business technology platform. But when you drill down into S/4HANA Cloud Public Edition, like the true software as a service version, the rules of engagement change entirely.
How so?
Well, the Clean Core is no longer a polite recommendation. It's enforced.
Which is wild, because in the old days, SAP would say, hey, maybe don't mess with the underlying code too much. And then companies would immediately go in and write thousands of lines of custom code anyway.
Oh, yeah. Millions of lines sometimes.
Right. I mean, consultants basically made a living hard-coding specific tax rules for Brazil or Italy right into the belly of the software. Is the implication here that the old way of embedding everything was just a massive mistake?
Well, think about the sheer weight of technical debt that created. If your ERP is heavily customized with localized tax logic baked right into the core, upgrading it takes months, sometimes years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it becomes this multi-million-dollar upgrade project full of system freezes, endless testing. But in the public cloud, updates happen quarterly, strictly on the vendor schedule. You don't do an upgrade project anymore. You just wake up and the system has been updated overnight.
Wait, which means if your core is full of custom tax logic, that quarterly update would literally break your entire business.
Exactly. The system would collapse. That's why the public edition enforces structural constraints. There's no ABAP development access. You can't create custom tables. You can't write custom Z programs. And critically, you absolutely cannot embed country-specific tax logic into the ERP core.
Has to stay perfectly clean.
Right. The ERP has to remain a pristine, highly upgradable system of record.
Okay, but this brings up a rather massive problem for anyone running a global business. If I'm, technically locked out of putting my compliance and tax logic inside the house, that logic still has to live somewhere. It doesn't just evaporate.
Right. You still have to pay taxes.
Yeah. So what does the architecture actually give you to catch that logic?
The backyard. Going back to your analogy, in this ecosystem, that backyard is the SAP Business Technology Platform, or BTP.
Ah, okay.
Since the core is locked, BTP becomes the new sandbox. It is the designated architecture for everything that the Clean Core cannot legally or technically contain.
Okay, so the sources map out the blueprint of BTP. And to really understand how the future of finance is being wired together, we have to look at the mechanisms moving the data. Let's look at the data bridge first. SAP Integration Suite.
Yes, the Integration Suite.
The sources refer to this as extracting data and putting it into a canonical format. So basically, it takes a messy sales order, strips away all your weird company-specific internal codes, and translates it into a standard, universally understandable language.
That canonical format is absolutely essential because you're preparing the data to be read by external systems. The Integration Suite pulls the standard data out of the locked S/4HANA core and acts as the secure bridge to the outside world.
Well, wait, here's where it gets really interesting to me. If the Integration Suite is already grabbing the data and moving it, why wouldn't we just have it translate that data into the specific country's tax XML format right then and there?
Ah, I see where you're going.
Like, if Italy requires a highly specific e-invoice format, just have the Integration Suite format there for Italy while it's in transit. It feels like we're adding an unnecessary extra step if we don't do it there.
And that specific shortcut is what architects call the pre-formatted trap.
Pre-formatted trap.
Yeah. Building country-specific compliance logic into your integration flows, your iFlows, is incredibly dangerous. You were simply recreating the exact same hard-coded nightmare you had on-premise. You're just hiding it in the cloud integration layer instead of the ERP core.
Ah, so you're just moving the clutter from the living room into the hallway, but it's still clutter.
Exactly. And when Italy inevitably changes its format next year, your integration breaks. Worse than clutter, it's a bottleneck. The Integration Suite is designed to be a high-speed courier, not a tax lawyer.
That makes a lot of sense.
It should strictly carry canonical data and then hand it off to a dedicated external compliance platform that actually understands the nuances of Italian tax law.
Speed is the perfect pivot point here, too, because moving data out cleanly is only half the battle. You have to move it fast.
Yeah.
For decades, finance has relied on batch processing. You wait until midnight, the system scoops up all the day's invoices and processes them all at once.
Right, which inherently makes finance a backward-looking function. You're always looking at yesterday.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But the BTP blueprint replaces that with SAP Event Mesh.
Right, because batch processing is a relic of older hardware limitations. Event Mesh introduces an event-driven flow. The exact millisecond a sales order is created or changed in S/4HANA, an event is published to the mesh.
It's like a restaurant kitchen, right?
Yeah.
The waiter, which is the ERP, takes your order, drops the ticket on the carousel, and immediately walks back to the dining room.
Yeah, perfect analogy.
He doesn't stand there staring at the chef waiting for the food to be cooked before he can take another order. The carousel, the event mesh routes, that ticket to the grill station or the salad station asynchronously.
And that asynchronous routing is what saves the system from grinding to a halt. The ERP fires off the event notification and goes right back to its primary job. The mesh handles routing that signal to whatever external compliance or analytical system needs to react to it in real time.
So we have clean data moving out and we have it moving at millisecond speed. But where does it actually sit so people can look at it? The architecture relies on SAP HANA Cloud as the data foundation, specifically using a zero-copy architecture, or federation.
Yeah, federation. To really appreciate why federation is such a breakthrough, you have to remember the old extract transform load or ETL nightmare.
Oh, man. ETL.
Yeah, if you wanted to analyze financial data in the past, you had to physically copy it out of the ERP and dump it into a massive data warehouse. And every single time you copy data, it degrades, it gets stale, the copy process breaks, or it loses its original context.
So it's the difference between checking a book out of the library and taking it home versus reading it at the desk inside the library.
Exactly. With zero copy, the analytical tools look directly at the data where it lives without physically moving it. Everyone in the company is looking at the exact same original book.
Which creates the concept of one version of truth.
Yes.
And you need that ultimate truth for the most scrutinized layer of this whole blueprint, which is SAP AI Core.
Right. AI Core is the intelligence hub where you deploy machine learning models. But the sources highlight a strict architectural boundary here called the Layer 4 exclusivity principle.
Meaning, no AI model is ever allowed to access raw ERP data directly.
Never.
They are strictly confined to consuming that clean, canonical, federated data sitting in our cloud.
Because pointing a generative AI model at raw, messy, unstandardized ERP tables is just a recipe for disaster.
They'll just make things up, right?
Exactly. The AI will hallucinate. It will draw false correlations and make genuinely bad financial decisions. By enforcing this exclusivity principle, the architecture physically guarantees the AI only ever sees data that has already been standardized, cleansed, and validated.
Okay, so we have this incredibly robust backyard built out. We have standard data couriers, real-time event routing, zero-copy databases, and heavily governed AI. But companies don't spend millions of dollars on architecture just for the fun of it.
No, they certainly don't.
The sources make it really clear that this blueprint is designed to solve a very specific, terrifyingly urgent regulatory nightmare. And that is real-time global e-invoicing, or continuous transaction controls.
Yeah, CTCs. Governments around the world are fundamentally changing how taxes are collected. They are no longer waiting for you to send a summary at the end of the month. They want to see, approve, and register every single transaction in real time before you are legally allowed to send the invoice to your customer.
And here is the massive hidden gap in the standard RISE contract. A company signs the contract, gets to the cloud, and just assumes they're covered.
A very dangerous assumption.
Right, because standard RISE does not contain a global, real-time, multi-jurisdiction continuous transaction control infrastructure out of the box.
No, it doesn't. Now, SAP does offer document and reporting compliance, or DRC, which covers a portion of jurisdictions. However, DRC is built on SAP-managed regulatory content, meaning it inherits SAP's update release cadence.
And global tax authorities do not care about a software vendor's quarterly release schedule.
Not even a little bit.
If Poland dictates that a massive new XML tax format goes live on a random Tuesday in March, it goes live on Tuesday. If your system updates in April, you are illegally operating in Poland for a month.
And that timing mismatch is exactly why the architecture demands a purpose-built external global compliance platform sitting alongside BTP. BTP orchestrates the canonical data and the real-time events, but that external platform holds the actual constantly updating regulatory content and maintains the direct connections to the government authorities.
So when you put those two pieces together, the BTP orchestration and the external compliance engine, it completely changes the reality of running a corporate finance department.
It's a total game changer.
Expanding into new countries stops being a massive, year-long IT integration project. Instead, because your data is already canonical and flowing in real time, turning on a new jurisdiction becomes a simple configuration toggle in the external platform.
Furthermore, it shifts compliance from a pure sunk cost into a proactive financial asset.
How so?
Well, you aren't just desperately trying to file taxes on time anymore, because all of this transactional data is being perfectly standardized and validated in real time. You are actually generating a continuous stream of canonical financial intelligence.
Which means that mythical CFO cockpit actually becomes a reality. I mean, for decades, CFOs have been begging for a single dashboard showing global cash flow, risk, and tax exposure up to the minute.
Right, and it was literally impossible.
Because the data was locked in 50 different localized, customized on-premise systems. But now it's all normalized and sitting right there in a cloud.
Bringing all of this data together into one unified real-time stream forces a real paradigm shift. We are not just changing the software, we are fundamentally altering the mechanics of accounting itself.
Which brings us to arguably the most radical implication in these sources, the death of the month-end close.
Yes.
If you have ever worked in corporate finance, you know the human misery of the month-end close. It means working until 3 a.m. on a Saturday, staring at 2 different spreadsheets, trying to figure out why the financial accounting numbers don't perfectly match the management accounting numbers.
It's a nightmare, but the month-end close only exists as a concept because older accounting systems were heavily siloed. You had separate tables for different types of ledgers.
Right.
So the end of the month was an agonizing reconciliation process just to stitch the fractured data back together. But S/4HANA introduces the Universal Journal, which merges those disparate ledgers into one single table. Every transaction hits everywhere, all at once.
And when you combine that unified ledger with the real-time event mesh we talked about earlier, that frantic end-of-month sprint just disappears. The process known as record to report, or R2R, stops being a batch processing nightmare and becomes a continuous invisible monitoring function. The books are essentially always closed, or rather, always closing.
But the critical question becomes, Who is doing the continuous monitoring?
Ah, yes.
The architecture replaces exhausted accountants with what the sources call the agentic stack and Internet of Agents. These are specialized AI agents deployed on BTP working autonomously.
Let's walk through the life cycle of a single invoice to see how these agents actually interact, because it is fascinating.
Let's do it.
The millisecond an invoice is created, the transaction validation agent wakes up. It instantly checks the invoice against global tax rules and approves it.
And the moment it is validated, the reconciliation agent takes over. It continuously matches intercompany transactions across different subsidiaries. So you no longer wait 30 days to discover that, say, the French subsidiary and the German subsidiary have a €1 million discrepancy.
Right. It is flagged and resolved the second the transaction occurs.
Exactly.
And while that happens, the VAT cash flow agent is acting like an autonomous treasury optimizer. It monitors your global tax position and calculates the precise, optimal millisecond to file for a VAT recovery to maximize your working capital.
Simultaneously, you have an anomaly detection agent quietly analyzing the broader data stream, sniffing out irregular patterns or potential audit exposures before they ever make it onto a finalized report.
Wow.
And overseeing all of this is the R2R intelligence agent, continuously orchestrating the ledger to maintain that always-on close.
Okay, I have to jump in here with the obvious pushback. The Terminator scenario.
I knew this was coming.
If I am a CFO, or worse, an external auditor from a Big Four firm, and you casually mention that invisible AI agents are autonomously validating transactions, optimizing international taxes, and closing the corporate books in milliseconds without a human ever looking at them, I mean, I'm going to absolutely panic. The laws of control sounds terrifying. How do you possibly govern a ghost in the machine?
It is a completely justified fear, and it is exactly why jumping straight into AI without fixing the foundational architecture first is dangerous.
Okay.
But BTP solves this through a rigorous observability infrastructure. It generates cryptographic, immutable logs of every single action taken on the platform.
Immutable meaning they absolutely cannot be altered, deleted, or faked by anyone, not even an administrator.
Precisely. So when that panicked auditor asks, "Who made this massive adjustment posting to the European ledger?" they don't get a blank stare. The system provides an exact, undeniable log.
What does that look like?
It literally states, "The R2R intelligence agent made this posting triggered by this specific event at this exact millisecond based on this exact canonical data input." It provides a level of traceability that is vastly superior to a human accountant making a manual adjustment on a local spreadsheet.
It's a perfect millisecond accurate digital paper trail that grounds this incredibly high-tech vision into something a strict compliance officer can actually sign off on. But let's bring this all the way down to the immediate practical reality of you, the listener. Let's talk about the actual multi-million-dollar contracts being signed right now. The sources make a very urgent point about the strategic room where it happens.
Yeah, the central warning of these sources is that this architectural reckoning needs to happen long before the BTP architecture is finalized and deployed. You cannot defer the compliance discussion to a post-go-live phase.
Because if you do, and suddenly Poland or France mandates a massive new real-time e-invoicing requirement, you will realize you built your backyard sandbox completely wrong.
Right.
You'll have a pristine, locked house, but absolutely no way to plug it into the government's grid.
The source refers to this as the question inside the question. Companies are rushing to sign these massive RISE contracts entirely focused on answering the question of how to get their infrastructure to the cloud. But they are completely failing to ask the question inside. Where will our tax and compliance logic actually live once we get there?
Which means it is no longer just an IT procurement decision.
Not at all.
The sources explicitly state that the CFO, the CIO, the tax leader, and the enterprise architect all need to be sitting in the exact same room, debating these exact architectural constraints before anything is signed.
Doing the hard work up front unlocks what the sources call a compounding return.
Right.
Yes, getting the architecture perfectly right for your first new country mandate is difficult. But because you took the time to build a canonical, event-driven foundation, activating your 10th country isn't an IT project at all, it's just a toggle switch.
And that compounding return applies to the AI agents as well. The first agent you deploy takes serious governance and testing. But by the time you deploy the 6th agent, the process is practically instant because the underlying data foundation is flawless.
And frankly, if you do not build this architecture deliberately, you will be forced to assemble it reactively. And a reactive patchwork architecture will never be able to support the kind of continuous, autonomous financial operations we have been discussing today.
So if you are listening to this right now, and your company's preparing to migrate to SAP Public Cloud, or you are in the middle of a massive RISE transformation, you need to be the one who speaks up in the next planning meeting.
Absolutely.
You need to ask where the tax logic is going to live. You need to ask if the BTP architecture is actually being built to handle continuous autonomous compliance.
Because the Clean Core is coming, and you need to be ready for it.
We have covered incredible ground today. We started with the harsh realities of the lockdown Clean Core, we moved across the standard data bridges of BTP, and looked at an entire ecosystem of AI agents autonomously closing the corporate books. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that takes everything we've learned and pushes it one step further.
Let's hear it.
We just spent a lot of time talking about how your company will deploy the Internet of Agents on BTP to autonomously validate transactions, optimize tax recovery, and maintain a continuous close. But think about the other side of that transaction.
Right, the government.
Global tax authorities are not sitting still. What happens when global governments deploy their own AI agents to audit your agents in real time? Are we heading toward a near future where corporate finance isn't a human activity at all, but rather an invisible, millisecond speed negotiation between government AI and corporate AI?
Wow. That is a staggering implication, because when the regulator auditing you is an algorithm, your compliance architecture better be absolutely flawless.
Really makes you look at that smart home landlord in a whole new light. The rules aren't just there to keep the house clean, they're there to make sure the house can survive the future. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take a hard look at your own organization's architecture with fresh eyes. We'll catch you next time.